Hello and welcome to this episode of Community Connections, airing right here on OROMIA11. I am your host, Anna Orr, and today I have the Director of Social Equity, Jessica Jackson, and she is here on the behalf of the Office of Cannabis Management. We're going to talk about a new grant initiative taking place right here in the Twin Cities. This is going to be an episode you won't want to miss. Welcome to Community Connections, Jessica.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
Can you talk to me about your work with the Office of Cannabis Management?
Yeah, so the Office of Cannabis Management is a regulatory agency within the Minnesota State Enterprise, and we oversee the legal cannabis industry, which was, and also the medical cannabis market that came online in 2014, but we also have adult use cannabis, which came online in 2023. Within those endeavors, we look at licensing, we look at public health and safety through our enforcement efforts and our research leg. So you'll see a lot of production around what cannabis is doing. We also have our social equity arm, which is what I oversee. I'm the director of the Division of Social Equity, which is all around promoting the safety, development, and stability in communities that have been disproportionately harmed from cannabis prohibition and usage.
I think that's so important to explain to people, because I think when they heard that cannabis was legal in the state of Minnesota, people believed that it was going to be such a free-for-all. And then there's such a level of stigma around cannabis usage as well as the criminalization of cannabis. How are you all kind of working to reduce some of that stigma through some of the efforts you all are having at the OCM?
Yeah, I think that the most important way to reduce the stigma is through education, so that folks understand that it's not a free-for-all. In fact, it is a very highly regulated industry with lots of rules and complex regulations for folks to follow. There's also a lot of, like I said, we have a lot of research around public health and data that's happening with folks that use cannabis. I want to acknowledge that I understand the stigma that exists within our communities. Many of us have seen family members, our parents, or even ourselves be fall victim to our criminal justice system and serve time in jail. We also see a lot of folks that experience substance use disorder and how that relates to cannabis and intersects into cannabis. So the stigma doesn't come unfounded, right? But what we try to do to reduce that stigma is just increase public knowledge around what are the safety nets that are being created through our laws, what are their roles and responsibilities as citizens to continue to advocate for change in law, and then making sure that that revenue from the industry is being reinvested into communities that have been harmed.
Now, I want to ask you a little bit about some of the strategies you guys are using at the OCM to connect with minority communities. We know that in the past that has been one of the largest groups affected by the criminalization of cannabis.
Yeah, data from the ACLU shows that Black men are 5 times more likely to be criminalized for cannabis use in Minnesota. And so we can't talk about equity or social equity without understanding the deep-seated racial injustice that has come with this industry. In fact, in 1937, when the United States passed the Marijuana Taxation Act, a lot of the rhetoric that was used to pass the law to criminalize cannabis was rooted in xenophobia. And so as we think about how those historical harms and how that historical xenophobia has been captured in today, we see it through racial profiling and criminalization, and then the collateral consequences that come along with that, right? So someone who has a criminal record carries with them 48,000 barriers to access, whether it be I can't take my kids on field trips, or I can't get a house, I can't get a job, I can't go to school, right? And so some of the things that our state has done through our legislation is expunging records, right, immediately. So folks who have low-level cannabis convictions and felonies are eligible for expungement in our state. We also have something called social equity within licensure to ensure that if folks are interested in pursuing entrepreneurship within the cannabis industry, industry, they get some advantages related to that, right? And there are other populations that are targeted through our social equity program, and we'll talk about that later. And we also want to make sure that we're outreaching. We have accessible outreach, right? Whether that is if you want our organization to come to a community organization and present out, we have our speaker request form right online. You can request a speaker. You can schedule a meeting directly with me, directly with our outreach director. We want to make sure that the community is reflected in our decisions and in our conversations. And I think that is the unique, the thing that stands out uniquely about our agency is how accessible our leaders are to community, to ensure that questions that need to be answered or feedback that they want to deliver can be heard, whether it be through public forums. We have a Cannabis Advisory Council that meets quarterly that's open to the public to come and provide comments. Anytime we pass rules or proposed new amendments to our medical cannabis program, we offer public comment for folks to deliver comments in. And then you can also schedule with our team to have some one-on-one talks with us. And so as we think about reaching out to minority communities, it's really that accessible engagement.
I think that is so important that you spoke about record expungement. We recently had someone here from the city of Minneapolis that was the director of voter registration and was talking about how we recently changed laws here in the state of Minnesota to give back so many convicted felons their civic duty to vote. And so this election was so pivotal for people to start realizing their power in making change right here on the ground.
Yeah, I was just talking to an organization that's doing voter re-engagement for reentry services, and there's about 50,000 folks that are now eligible to vote in Minnesota. And so as we think about re-entering folks and what they have rights, right? Like their rights are restored, and that's a really dope marker in history for Minnesota.
A second chance for people here in Minnesota and hopefully around the country getting an opportunity to recognize the importance and value of their voice and their experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you talked about accessibility and being out in the community and wanting to work with community organizations to talk about the work of the OCM. What are you all doing to make sure that your materials are linguistically sound for the different communities that are represented here? There are so many beautiful cultures and identities here in the state.
Absolutely. And first, I want to say thank you for having this platform, for making this information accessible for different communities. And I think this is our second time as an office coming and speaking to you. And so it's really around how are we accessing platforms that already exist within communities, ensuring that we can come and hold space. So at our first social equity convening, we had that at the Sabathani Community Center to ensure that the community was reflected there. We're making sure that we outreach to diverse media sources. For the grant in particular, we created a communications toolkit that's on our website so that folks can amplify the grant in community using social media graphics, and we've have our copy written out for you. And we just want to make sure that we are continuing to partner with folks that amplify into diverse community groups.
I think that is so important, and I hope that this is the first of many for you specifically to come and chat with us about the work that's going on at the OCM. Now, you talked a little bit about social media. Where can people find you guys to keep up with the work of the OCM on social media?
And that's a great question. And I have to name that we are a governmental regulatory agency. And so we don't have some of the traditional fun social media platforms, but we do have a very accessible website, which is segmented per our different lanes, because we have so many different lanes. We partner with community organizations to amplify our work. We have a newsletter that you can subscribe to on our website that goes out regularly. We also have a YouTube channel, which makes all of our technical assistance that we provide accessible and stored online. And those are the primary platforms that we have for folks to find us. But our website, you can go to mn.gov/OCM, and that will pull up our website.
Okay. People need to definitely tap in with the website as well as the YouTube channel, because I think that's important for people to kind of learn about what you guys are doing And the newsletter seems to be such an important way for them to keep up with the changes that are taking place. We know this office hasn't been open for too long, and so things are ever so changing, and we need to be on the scope to know what's going on.
Absolutely. We opened officially in 2023, and cannabis is still federally illegal, right? So regulation is constantly evolving in this industry. And so staying attuned to those, like you said, ever-changing regulations is going to be key to staying in touch with us.
Now, your work, you are literally the director of social equity. I know many people have heard this term before, and I think people say, oh, it's a keyword, but people don't actually understand what that means. Can you kind of explain that as we kind of start to switch lanes about the next part of our conversation?
Absolutely. So I think that, yeah, so equity generally is under attack right now. So it is a jargony word. It can also be very polarizing, but social equity is defined in Minnesota statute. And in our statute, it is those communities that have been disproportionately harmed from cannabis prohibition and usage. And so I think a key term that we have to operationalize when we think about social equity is disproportionate. So who has this affected more severely and differently based off of representation within our state demographic. And so the legislators have identified 4 key populations that are defined as social equity applicants. And so the primary one are our justice impacted communities. So in that, we've done a really great job in defining justice impacted communities really robustly. So that's including those who have convictions themselves, the parents or guardians of folks who have convictions, the children of folks who have convictions, and also folks who live in communities that have been over-policed. So when we're thinking about justice impacted, we're not just thinking about folks who have convictions themselves, but everyone who's affected by that conviction. The other population is our early stage farmer group, which are farmers who have made between $5,000 to $100,000 in this last year in their farm operations. And that's important because there are gaps around who is farming in Minnesota, right? And as we think about agriculture and the changes within agriculture, we want to make sure that farmers within Minnesota have access to the emerging cannabis agricultural industry, right? We also have our economically disadvantaged communities, and those are communities that are below the median family income threshold. They also are the communities that are on the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, high on that CDC Social Vulnerability Index. They are the communities that have higher than average SNAP assistance, and they are the communities that have higher than average poverty levels in the community. And then the 4th area is our military affiliated group. And we know that folks who are in the military can't access cannabis or might lose rights because of cannabis usage. And so those folks who have also been dishonorably discharged. So those big 4 populations are who we qualify in law as social equity eligible. And then when we think about the communities who have been disproportionately harmed, they're those communities where those social equity eligible folks are more likely to live.
I think that's really important, and it sounds like it's expanding the reach beyond what people believe cannabis looks like on the front end. I don't think we give enough credits to farmers. They really are the heartland of this country and keep us fed and offer so many amazing things to us every day. And we see in the news currently that the Trump administration is going after them in specific ways, and you see on social media how many of them are coming forward saying they're at risk of losing their farms. And I think we need to start thinking more consistently about them instead of thinking about, well, yeah, we get food and it's at the grocery store. How does it get there? And what does that look like? And also, how can they help us, maybe from a holistic standpoint, start to reshape some of the thoughts around cannabis? I think that's really important. Now, we are here today talking about the CanRenew Community Restoration Grant Program. Can you talk to me about where the vision for this idea came from? I think it's so important, and it's going to offer some assistance to some really good organizations out here and people that are doing really great work.
Absolutely. I'm excited because as we think about social equity, I think a lot of times folks land on, it should be folks who get licensure. Social equity doesn't stop at licensure. Social equity is record expungement. It is licensure. It is the technical assistance to help folks understand their laws and rights in this industry. It is decriminalization, and it is reinvestment. And so the CanRenew Community Restoration Grant is in this year, it's a $1 million fund that was named within legislation. So our legislators, actually, that's who envisioned this grant. And next year in 2026, it will increase to $15 million a year. Wow. And it aims to reinvest in communities where social equity eligible individuals are more likely to live. And it is targeting any type of organization, nonprofit organization, for-profit businesses, educational institutions, community groups, partnerships between all of those, that is doing work and making investments around economic development, improving social determinants of health, youth civic engagement, civil legal aid, and violence prevention, among other things. It's very open for what the community thinks that they need. Legislators just want to make sure that the communities that have been harmed from cannabis prohibition and usage are also being invested in.
I think that's so necessary for us to expand as a community at large. Mm-hmm. Now, talk to me about what the requirement for the fund usage is, so that people don't get the money and then we all start seeing Porsche Cayennes driving down the street.
Yes, please don't. The funds are meant to be invested in community, and so the communities, so organizations that are eligible also need to have a tax ID number. So if you're a community group who does not, or an LLC that just started and you don't have tax ID, because this grant is over $50,000. There is some financial auditing that we have to do before awarding the grant. So you need to make sure that you can partner. Partnerships are eligible. So maybe you're a newer organization, or you're a community group that's organizing around a certain issue. How can you partner with a more long-standing organization to reach these funds? The funds need to be going towards projects that are new or expansions of current projects. So if you are a nonprofit that's doing work around workforce development and you currently have a cohort of folks that you're working with, you cannot use the funds to cover current operational expenses. They have to be used towards expansive projects. So building new capacity, expanding the amount of folks that are engaging, new expenses, not current operational ones. And the funds need to go towards community needs. So whether that is economic development programs, which could be things like a workforce development, it could be something around housing stability, it could be an education program, thinking about violence prevention. This could be intervention work, right? This could be youth engagement work, youth civic engagement to ensure that our youth understand how they can create change in the future, violence prevention, civil legal aid, so we could cover more work around folks who are re-entering and going after expungement. So any of those issues, really improving social determinants of health. So that can literally be anything. And so as you're working on your project description and your project work plan, you just need to be very clear around your targeted impact, who will be impacted, because the only people that we're looking to impact are those eligible communities. Mm-hmm. And if you have match funds, while that is not a part of your scoring criteria, we do need to know that, so that we know what your actual need is in your budget, and then your budget and how you're breaking down how you're spending these dollars.
I think that's important, and this sounds like such an important opportunity for the community to start getting some money directly on the ground to people that are doing this work every day, not trying to reinvent the wheel, but people are saying, we need some support. We already have a good idea, or we're already doing really good work, but we're being stretched really thin. Mm-hmm. And maybe they need to hire more people. Maybe they need to be able to start providing more support for community members to attend. Speaking about reaching out to community members, you all recently had a series of webinars where people were able to go through this entire process and get information necessary. What was the community response from this?
We got lots of excitement, lots of concern. As if you don't know, a lot of state funding is reimbursement model. And so lots of concern around how do I have capacity. And that's why one of the things that is beautiful about this grant is that it's open to partnerships. So you can partner with a fiscal sponsor who might be able to front load some of the initial costs so that you can get into that reinvestment cycle, that reimbursement cycle. We got lots of ideas, lots of folks thinking about how they weren't going to be able to have a summer apprenticeship to work with youth, but now are thinking that this could help educate and train youth in that workforce development cohort. We got lots of information around how to educate health practitioners with cannabis. And we got some folks talking about mental health resources and how that can support community aid. We got lots of organizations talking about the justice impacted community, folks that are doing re-entry voter registration and how they want to expand services and grow their organization, and how this grant will be a stopgap to we're not doing as much voter engagement right now, but how do we make sure we have other wraparound services to support the justice impacted community? So there's lots of great ideas out there for how they want to use the funds, and that lets me know that there's a lot of need.
Now, for people interested, talk about the timeline for this opportunity, because people do need to start getting their ducks in a row, so to speak, so that they can be on the other side of waiting to hear back from the application process. Absolutely.
And the application closes March 24th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. And the application opened February 10th. So it was open. It's been open. It'll be open for 6 weeks, which is another point of community feedback that we got. A lot of organizations were asking for at least 6 weeks to make sure that their boards of director had enough time to review the grant. And when the application closes, our goal is to have it encumbered and being able to be used by June 30th.
I think that's important. People pay attention. March 24th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time is your opportunity to put this in and start the amazing work ahead for 2026. The award will be dished out around June 30th.
Yep. And then you have 12 months to complete your project.
Okay.
And folks did ask a lot of questions about whether or not they would be eligible for additional funding if their project is successful. This is a competitive grant with the state, meaning that we can't extend funding. You have to go through the competitive cycle. But if you have a proof point that shows success and you want to expand that programming, you're absolutely eligible to reapply once that pool of money grows from $1 million to $15 million.
This has been wonderful chatting with you, Jessica, about the work going on at the Office of Cannabis Management. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I hope that you will come back on the other side of this opportunity and share with people what's next so that people can stay connected to the work of the OCM.
Yeah, it is guaranteed now.
Okay, good. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for this episode of Community Connections. As always, I am your host, Anna Orr. I thank you for watching, and make sure that you reach out to the OCM if you have questions, comments, or concerns, or if you're interested about further opportunities through them. Make sure you look up their website and stay connected to them. This has been Community Connections, airing on OROMIA11. I look forward to connecting again with you soon.